Alright, so welcome back into another Dragon Ball Super Card Game video, and today I'm going to go through set 16 Dabura, which is probably my favorite deck, or at least archetype, out of set 16. The next favorite being Great Priest, which is probably going to be after this video. Set 16 releases this week on Friday, I do believe, pre-release. You've probably seen the box opening and all the other stuff that I've been doing. But if you do want any other decks or leaders reviewed, or at least for me to go through and present my list, because I do have set 16 Vegeta, the promo, even though he got errated, and I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. But please let me know in the comments below. And also, if you are interested, we do have our Master Duel tournament coming up this Thursday, which is on the screen right now, and you can go ahead and sign up with the link below. So as you can tell from the title, I think Dabura is going to be overlooked, and it's really sad because the actual archetype, and as well as just black decks in general in this game, is actually pretty exciting and pretty fun to play. A lot of them, I would say, outside of Super Saiyan, pretty much every set there's a playable black leader. I think Dabura is playable, but I think also Bandai ruined him, or at least nerfed him really hard with using the spirit boost keyword, and as well as bottom decking a card every time that you swap. Those two things alone really just ruin the archetype for Dabura for him to be viable and competitive. If he didn't have those things, he would actually be really good. I think probably one of the best aggro decks that we have access to. I think the no protection thing, and as well as the lack of deflect with pretty much all the cards that he has to his disposal, is kind of the balancing mechanic. Obviously it's not Storm, obviously it's not Swap, obviously it's not King Vegeta, but in black I can't really think of another deck outside of Vegex that was this aggro. And I think I'm just touting it a little too much. I think people are going to be looking at like U3 for Vegex and thinking that was the best aggro deck, and whatever. Dark Broly was in his league of his own. I don't know if that's an aggro deck, but definitely something that can kill turn 3. Listen, I don't think Dabura is that good. Maybe I should just dial it back a little bit. Either way, you can tell from the leader effects, he looks at the top 5 for an Evil Wizard, a Black Demon Race, and a Black Demon God, and add it to your hand and then shuffle. His Awaken is interesting, 4 or less, and then you can draw 2, or if they're flipped over, the opponent that is, you can flip over and draw 2 as well, and add your life until 4. I think this awakening effect is great because it doesn't affect the alternate awakening, basically doesn't affect your draw 2. Things that do affect the draw 2, like starter deck Vegeta, is kind of whack because you want the cards in your hand. Effectively, when you aggro them enough, which does happen if you're at 8 or 7, it's a 6 5-card awakening, which is really good. It's awesome. This is the whole point of Dabura, is just to swing as much as you can, tap out, and then just use your hand as a resource afterwards. The Awakening's effect is that you draw 1 when you attack, you pay 1 to play up to 1 Black Unison card with unspecified cost with 20,000 power from your drop area and place in rest mode, and then at the end of the turn it gets sent to warp, which is interesting as far as a balancing mechanic, because you can't just keep doing it over and over again. The unisons that we'll go through, especially the one that came out of set 16, is pretty decent, especially with Empower, and it's no specified cost, which means you can just play it for 1 or more. We'll go over that. The Spirit Boost is that this card gains 6,000 power for the duration of the battle, which is pretty nifty, I would say, especially if you have a beefy unison, or at least a unison that kind of sticks. Most of the time with 20,000 power, people aren't really touching it, and if they do, then they're not swinging at your leader, which is great. On, let's look at the Archetypal Cards, which are the Poutines, which is just all the Poutine cards, which the top right one is namely Beitin, which is the alternative, which isn't really replacing Beitin. Whatever. Either way, I like the cards, okay? The 1-drop searches top 3 and you bottom deck the rest, which is really good. It's pretty much your starter card, and she is a free swap, which isn't really free. When you really think about it, the commitment is Spirit Boost 1, which you need the 20k or the Bardock Unison that we use in this deck, or, well, and you bottom deck a card each time you swap, which is not great. The thing that does replace itself is the 3-drop, which is probably the best target for this, and a really good card in the deck, and really any black deck. And not to mention that The poutine and like the swap engine in itself isn't really locked to the leader or the Dabura leader. You can play this in any black deck, which I almost guarantee you this top line will be seen in other black decks as people actually explore the set. Anyway, the 3-drop is a 15k blocker, which basically you can dark over around 1, which is really easy for 3 in your drop as a black deck. When you play the card from your hand, you play a token out, and then you can use that token in the activate battle to draw 1, and it gains 10k during the battle. So it's a 25k that restands, and you can swing again for 15k. This, along with the Toa, along with the gravy below it, really adds to the attacks as well as damage to the opponent. And this is why it makes a really good aggro deck, because you just keep playing the 1-drops, searching your deck, getting that card, and then using that card or another card to just use it as a swap cost, I should say. And then the top right card is the promo, which unfortunately might be a little expensive, just depending on how much this swap line gets played. It's a 3-cost blocker, which basically is a target for the 1-drop to swap into. You play the 1-drop, you call swap, and then you pay the cost of Spirit Boost and as well as bottom decking, and you play out one of the 3-drops. This guy or girl takes control of a 4 or less and switches to active mode, which doesn't really hit Turles, doesn't really hit a couple things, but against like yellow decks, for instance, you would take the Mecha Frieza or another thing like the Bardock Ape. And of course, there's other decks and other things that you could take, but she's really good. I think she is great as a 5k blocker, and then just steal some things and slash removes. With the new rulings, it's kind of annoying to really rule this card as well as the owner, but it's whatever. Then we have the gravy cards, same thing. It's 1 cost that swaps into the 3 costs over here. The 1 cost, you can swing, and it gains 11k, which is a 15k attack when you take a life. And then the 3k is a double striker, 5 or 25k when it's played. And then it's just a 20k beater, which is pretty much in line for all of the other gravy cards that we have. And then we have the unison that comes with this archetype, which is the Dark King Mecha. This guy has Empower, and what that basically means, it can carry over amount of markers up to 2. So if you have a unison with 1 marker that is a black unison, basically, you can play this card for 1, and then it'll take that marker over and it'll have 2 markers. This can only attack when it has 4 or more markers, so you kind of have to work for that, which is understandable. But by the time you have 4, you're going to be using Spirit Boost and you're going to run out. So you're going to swing, use your Spirit Boost and stuff like that, and then you go from there. It's also really good with the leader effect, because you use the leader effect to play it out with 1 marker. You use the effect to go to 2 markers, and then you have another one in hand. You place it down, it goes to drop instead of warp, keep that in mind, and then it carries over the 2 markers, and you can go to 4 after you use the new unison effect, which is basically the +1. +1 bottom deck something, well, you draw 1. Well, no, you do bottom deck something and then you draw 1. I wish it was the other way around, but whatever. And then the auto for the Spirit Boost, every time you use a Spirit, well, swap, I should say, every time you swap, which uses Spirit Boost, you get to warp something on their field 3 or less. Pretty nifty overall. I think every card here doesn't have a protection, but it is they all do something, which is nice. I think the only thing that you really have to look out for is yellow and red. Yellow is doable, red is a little annoying because they just keep killing everything on your board. You can't really keep something on board, which is the whole thing for Dabura. Now the Toa cards, another person's waifu, I'm sure. The 2-drop is the look at top 3, and then you get a evil wizard, demon race, demon god, or a black unison, which I didn't mention. The 1-drop poutine does the same thing as well, and then you bottom deck it, and then swap 3, you go into a 3-cost Toa, which we do have other Toas. This is just the new one on the right, and then you bottom deck a card as well. The 3-cost Toa has dual attack, 15k, and then when this card is played, you draw 1 card, which is nice that it replaces itself and gets you back that card that you put down at the bottom for swamp. And then your opponent may choose up to 2 cards in their battle cards or their hands and send them to the warp. If they send 1 or fewer with the warp, then you choose one of their unison cards with 4 or more markers and take control of it. This is pretty cool against blue. It is not very cool that the Toa is a 2-cost. And I'm going to go over 2 different lists that include paying for 2 and getting this 2-drop Toa for free, but most of the time it's a 2-cost 15k, and that doesn't feel very good, especially with something that has no protection. I only say this because both of these guys have no protection. If you're going against blue and they trunks, then there's 2 energy just gone. Same thing for a swap, but by the time that you put down this guy or this girl, the 2-drop, they're going to be using Trunks anyway. Or better yet, any other counterplay. There's so many other counterplays in blue that are Trunks that can hit both of these cards. Then we have the 1-drop that looks at the top 7. You can get a Unison, the one that we just saw, a specified cost, or you get a the same targets from last time, which is a Evil Wizard, Demon Race, or Demon God, and add it to your hand. It's pretty nifty, pretty good. I don't know if you need to use too many of them. The less extra cards in this deck, the better, in my opinion. But that's just me. Then Ready to Strike, Dabura was probably my favorite card before they started ruling the end of turn, which I think is now reversed, which is good. But I hope they update the Q&A. But basically, he is a 2-cost. You pay for 2, or you use the Meki Gabora card that I mentioned earlier, or try to mention, and then you swap into a 4-drop, which is the Dabura on the right, and you bottom deck 1. But the auto says when this card is played, your opponent may choose 1 card from their hand and set it as a warp. If they don't, you choose one of their opponent's leaders in rest mode, or one of their opponent's battle cards in rest mode of 4 costs or less, and it can't switch or it can't attack the next turn. Basically, the Sin Shenron that we have in yellow. It sucks that all this stuff, like Sin Shenron can pay 1 and then just play out the 4-drop. Meanwhile, we have to have a Unison, we have to do Spirit Boost, we have to bottom deck a card, and it has no protection. So, I mean, it's super annoying that Bandai decided to make this card as a promo and then have all the effects as the Sin Shenron outside of swap, which is not that great, by the way. And then we have to work for it. I am just ranting at this point. I don't know if you guys seen how much I really like Dabura, and it's just so disappointing that it just sucks that a lot of this got. Moving on, the 4-drop is a Overwhelm for 3. You're never doing that, the Dark Overwhelm. You play the card, it replaces itself by drawing 1, and then they have to warp 1. I really like this because effectively you get a bunch of attackers. You have the Meki Gabora that pays 2, you crit a life, etc. We'll go over that in a second. You pay out this girl. You look at the top 3 to replace itself. This guy can lock their leader or make them warp 1, and then you swing both for 15k and 10k, and then you have a 15k attacker that replaces itself, and then it potentially does the steal for the Unison, 2 15k attacks, and then a 20k attacker that makes them warp. Which both of these guys will just stay on the field afterwards, which is the beauty thing of swap. There's no going away after that. Again, as you go more and more into the cards, you can kind of see where I'm coming from when it comes to an aggro standpoint. I'm going to go ahead and disappear so we can talk about the list for a second. We have the super combos, obviously, because you're going to get to 4 pretty quickly. We have pretty much all the cards that I talked about, 3 of the 20Ks, which is going to be kind of annoying for both of these cards. Look in the top 7 and 3. But, you know, if you hit it, you hit it. That's kind of where I am with that. And then we also have the Bardock Unison, the Unison of choice, because what I found is that as long as you have a bigger hand, you can definitely compete with Dabura. Because of the swap, you have to use the cards in your hand to bottom deck. And then this is just a 15k on the second turn, which people just are struggling to get rid of. Basically, they just keep attacking it, which is fine because it's going to go away into the drop or get empowered after it has 3 markers, go down to 2 for Spirit Boost, and then go into this guy afterwards. 4 and 4 of the Gravies. They're really combo power late game, but it can really close out games as a 25k dual attacker for 1 or double striker for 1. This can help you get more cards in hand as well and give you additional 15k attack. I'm a little iffy on this. This is where the Toas would be if you're playing the Meki Gabora engine, I think, which we'll look at in just a second. Support of the Dark Empire. I didn't really talk about this card. We'll really talk about it in the Super Saiyan God video with Devin. But really good in this deck. I can't express enough because you play out this guy and it uses itself as a token for her. So you can make a token on this side, swing twice for 25k and 15k. On their turn, you can use this as a negate and blocker. You block with the token for this guy, and then you use the activate battle to restand her and draw 1, and then it just fizzles out the attack. That's the type of stuff I really like in these type of decks, because it's just like you won't know that stuff until you start playing the deck. I am a proponent of people trying out as many archetypes as you can, as well as many decks as you can to find that stuff out. And then we also have one Demigra, A low, I would say pretty low overwhelm count, just these two, because outside of this guy, I guess, because it's just like you need it for the girl over here, and this also is searched by the leader and as well as the these guys over here as the tutors. But I mean, paying 2 when you need all the energy that you can in order to play out everything else is pretty important too. Yeah, play Super Kamehameha because you're gonna be at 4 or less. Fighting against fate, like I said, is just the one of two overwhelm, just so you can close out the game. For the TP, I mean, I can't get enough. If it's not her, it's gonna be her, and you just really want a swap target for each one of them. Ritual at hand is searchable. It's just like there's so many weird instances that Dabura Ritual at hand is kind of relevant, where Topo or Butopo or really literally anything that makes you discard. Like, it's just so funny that people find it, like, you can main this, and obviously when coming up in the fest you can side these out into something else, but it's just really funny that you can look at the top 5 and then just have this guy in hand against any red or green deck. And of course there's other applications for it. 1 Champa, of course. 2 of the Fin. I cannot stress enough that this guy is just so good. He clears boards without your board being affected, and it's just really good effective removal while you just don't have that much in this deck. Speaking of, we have the Kai, really good against just bigger boys you can't really deal with. Same thing with the 1 extra card here. Less extra cards is better. You could play Power Burst, but really effectively the support of the Dark Empire is just better. This is really good against like Gogeta Xeno or something like that. You can side in more with your side deck if you're playing Fest, so that way you can have this going first or going second, swing, and then just guarantee some damage and remove one of the Gogetas. So that's the type of thing I'm thinking about. 1 up for the Mass Saiyan as well as the Pan. Pan is probably the best because you're going to have a lot of battle cards. And then, of course, this guy in case they are doing some weird stuff to multiple life. All right, let's talk about the other part of what you could do with this deck with the Meki Gabora 3 cost. It's not a 2 cost, 3 cost, where you pay 2 and then you get to play out the boys, the Shroom Salsa, and as well as the Toa. You still do get the effects. You get the vanilla boys as well, which, by the way, the reason why, in my opinion, why they went with the bottom deck 1 is so you can bottom deck these vanillas, because they are pretty much useless, especially with Gravy being a 0/0 on the combo end. So when you actually do pay for the swap costs, you're basically effectively swinging with all of these boys and then swapping for the ones that are dead in your hand. That's my opinion. So the Meki Gabora can play out the vanillas. They can also play out the Toas and as well as the Daburas. So and everything else, like your leader searches these things out, so that way you can find the targets for you. I don't personally like this list. This is just the list I pressed before I switched to the first one, only because the Meki Gaboras are pretty ass after 4 life. You really just don't want to crit a life when you're fragile as hell already. Look at that, I'm back. We have other cards you can consider. We have the Dabura, which is cool. You get markers when you do stuff and when you combo stuff, but I mean, that's fine. You know, I don't really like it. The Dabura super combo, not as good as Vegeta. This is just simply just not as good. You just want to play the other super combos. It's cool as a swap target. You can swap into the 4-drop, fine, but not good. Supreme kind of time for the activate battle black, and then you get to use the separate effects, and it has servant, which makes it a bad card. But if you want more waifus in your deck, there you go. Oceanus is cool, but paying 2 or having 2 up and then paying 2 is just doesn't feel good in this deck, because you're just swinging. You're just literally just swinging so much. But it is good as a sideboard deck card. That's all I can think about. Dabura is really good against like Shinran or something else. I would say something like the red Goku, the 8-drop, the new finisher. It just stops everything, and they just don't know what to do. This is also searchable, and it also is reduced as long as your energy cost is all black. And yeah, that's it. It's just a 2 cost, which is a really good counterplay. Toa is cool, but against decks that just don't play that much on the field, you're not going to get that many markers. So it just feels bad when you can't do that. This is really much more of a sideboard deck. I haven't really experimented with Shinran, but I've seen it around and played against it as well. It's a +2. So, you know, 3 markers for swap and other things. Feels really good. Plus, you gain blocker, I do believe, when you use Spirit Boost. So it just kind of works out that way. And then Tag Team Gohan will proc off of swap. So I haven't found the room for this, but I highly recommend to try it out. Here are the turns. As the last thing in this video, we have the attack of the Dark Empire to look up top 7 and get a target for yourself, or Poutine, and then you just leave Poutine on the field. So that when you play a Unison, which Unison could be right here as well instead of down here. When you play a Unison, you can just play the Unison, use the effect, and then swap, and then pay for free afterwards for the Poutine or for the gravy, depending on what your hand looks like. And then turn 3, by that time you're lowering with their attacks and as well as swap and spirit boost, and then you can replace it with empower and then go from there. But sometimes you just keep this guy up and then you just draw cards basically, and then you just use spirit or this swap to bottom deck the unisons that you don't need. And then more Poutines, can't stress that enough. That's all I can really think about. I mean, you just do that over and over until you win. Let me know what you think. I've talked quite a lot for this one. I'm looking at the timer, but I really love this deck. It's this video probably get a few hundred views if I had a guess. But if it does end up in top 16 somewhere somehow, I don't know, I would freak out, honestly. I don't know if I would do that because I need a lot more cards as I look around. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.